Humor, defined by Webster Dictionary as something that is or is designed to be comical or amusing. Society identifies a standard for humor and what good taste in it really is. However, humor remains subjective for every individual, whether it displays underlying cruelty and crude implications or not.
In the present young American generation, racism is not traditionally seen in outward, aggressive, verbal, and physical attacks against minority people. Although those do happen frequently, young people in these halls at Bishop Dwenger High School, students all over the Americas, and young adults all over the internet demonstrate discrimination with subtlety that is easily missed when it is not being sought out. They use humor, memes, and jokes to relay an idea without feeling like a racist, separating themselves from such a condemning label. Nevertheless, this method of harm does not invalidate the negative effects of racism or cause any less wound to a person of color.
We are here walking the halls of Bishop Dwenger as students, investigating the depth, severity, and frequency of racism at this private school against non-black people of color. Casually referred to as whitewashed and sheltered, Bishop Dwenger High School is home to a decent number of minority students who demonstrate participation in all facets of academic and extracurricular life here.
An interview with the principal, Jason Shifley, shows the administration's point of view on the very real crisis here.
Well, when they are reported, we all jump in, all the administrators jump in, and I like to think that we take care of it right away, as best as we can. Mr. Schwarzkopf typically is the first one that gets notified that there may be some racism, maybe a comment that was written on the stall door, perhaps somebody heard things in the hallway. We take care of that as quickly as we can, as efficiently as we can. Unfortunately, we may not be able to satisfy everybody. And of course, we want to satisfy the victim, the person that has perceived that there's racism being said, being done against them. They're the ones that we want to take care of. And whether they like what we just did or not. Sometimes we handle things pastorally. So, we don't always jump in with capital punishment right away. It's more about understanding, okay? This is a Catholic school. It's a serious offense, don't get me wrong, but we also want to make sure that they understand that discipline is also part of learning. I mean, when you look at the root word of discipline, right, it's about learning. That's what it says in the dictionary. So we want them to learn that what they just did was wrong, what they said was wrong. And many times, the kids don't even understand whether if they're writing something down, or if they're singing the lyrics aloud, they didn't realize that it was inappropriate or that it was racist. Now there could be an argument there that, okay, these kids are old enough, they should know better, but a lot of these kids that we have here at Dwenger are sheltered, okay? I really do believe that. A lot of them come from sheltered homes. Parents keep a lot of things away from them, but yet they're still exposed to these kinds of things, and their minds aren't quite, I don't think they understand exactly what they're saying or doing. Now, you can tell there's some kids who just blatantly will say, yeah, and they admit, yeah, I said that, but they'll say that they're not racist, okay? They just thought that they were trying to be cool, whatever that means. And this may be your next question. Thankfully, we don't have a lot of these things brought to our attention, but yet on the flip side, maybe, paradoxically, there is a problem here. And I am aware that there's a problem here. So we do have a problem, and it's not just a white-black thing. We have, and I like to say, and I'm very happy to say, we have a growing Latino population, and there's racism, of course, towards them. Any minority, okay? But you can also have racism, the reverse racism as well. I think you've heard about that, reverse racism. So you have African-American students that just want to hang out with African-American students, and they don't want anything to do with the white students, and Latino, same thing. And so it does break my heart, although maybe it sounds insipid for me to say that, but when I walk into the cafeteria and I see all the African-American students sitting on one table, and then you don't see the intermingling of races in the cafeteria. Like you'd want to see, white kids and black kids, brown kids, whatever, I want them all to sit down because we're all God's children. And I really do believe that. And but even though there's that silent racism that's in our students and probably in our parents, some of our parents as well, You know, I think they do understand that what they feel and maybe, you know, what they think is wrong, so they don't say it. And I hope that they don't act out. But to say that there's no racism here, I think that would be an ignorant comment. I know there is. Okay. You know, I know kids like to tease a lot. You know, I was a teenager once. I understand they like to tease each other and say things that they later regret, whether they mean it or not. Okay. Sometimes that silent racism comes out in a comment, comes out when you're singing a song, for example. But I know it's underreported. Yeah. And I think the kids just say, oh, that's just the way it is. But it doesn't have to be that way. You know, I don't think you should put up with it. I know when you leave here, you know, we're the counterculture, right? And I don't know, I talked about our families being sheltered. We shelter our kids here when they walk into Dwenger. I know that sometimes that can be a problem. That can be actually, it can work against us. But when they walk out, then I want our kids to be prepared in how to deal with it, okay? And sometimes just letting it go and just ignoring it is not the best thing. You have to deal with it. And when someone is being disrespectful towards you because of the color of your skin, I think you need to stand your ground. I really do. I believe that. And we shouldn't take it. And you need to report it and let us know about it. We're growing in our diversity. We're not where I would like to be. And I'm not saying just because we're more white that I'm not happy. That wouldn't be right for me to say. It's almost like saying, well, you know, I'm upset because you're white, okay, or because I'm white. You know, we are who we are. But I would like to see more people of diversity, more Latino families. And again, I'm happy. When I first came here in 2004, I think our Latino population was maybe 1 to 2% of the total population. I think we have grown, and maybe I think we're at either 8 or 9% Latino. But again, I'd love to see us grow with more diversity. And Asian students as well. Okay, I haven't mentioned them, but I'd love to see us, again, because the Catholic Church is worldwide. And, you know, we take in all different races. And that's really, we're not a true snapshot of what the Catholic Church is. When you walk into Dwenger, all you see are white, predominantly white faces. But it's also when you look at our feeder schools, okay, and where we come from. Many of our families are white-collar families that live, you know, they're suburban families. Lures on the other end, they're on the south end of town. They have more of an urban population, okay. So I see that sprawl where it's coming now more this way, northwest, northeast, and we're seeing more diversity coming. I mentioned that there's a lot of silent racism. I want them to know what they're feeling, what, you know, maybe what they hear around them. I'm not saying necessarily from home, but maybe around their peers, that when they know it's wrong, it doesn't feel good, you know, they know. We're old enough to know better, right? And we can handle this pastorally. I can approach it pastorally, and I will. But it'd be nice if we didn't have to address it. They would know that it's wrong the first time they hear it, and they would shut down their friends, shut down their brothers and sisters, maybe even their parents if they hear their parents say it, and just say that's not right.
Shockingly, our principal recognizes the problem but doesn't see the true severity and needs of students that they have to say here and now in their own words.
So, my dad is Indian and immigrated to the United States in the late 90s. His family's Muslim, and he was Muslim for most of his life, except now he's converted to agnostic/atheist due to a lot of reasons, which include racism, and my mom's white, so I'm mixed race.
My name is Auden Inkenbrook, and I'm a senior at Bishop Dwenger High School, and my mother is Filipino. She was the first of her generation to be able to move to the States as a very young child, and my dad is German.
My dad comes from a family from Texas. They're all Mexican of indigenous descent, so they're all Native Americans. None of them are usually European descent, so they're all dark-skinned, like opposite of me. My mother, she's also half Native American, so I got diversity on both sides, but it's mostly the Mexican side I grew up in and exposed to.
I'm part Ecuadorian, I guess. South American, that's where my parents are from, Ecuador.
And so what my dad told me, from I could tell from what he said to me in Vietnamese, was he tried to escape from the war from Vietnam, but he didn't succeed, and he was stuck in Indonesia for a few years, and then they finally sent him back to Vietnam. But then when he was sent back to Vietnam, before he got stuck in Indonesia, he filed like a paper to America asking if he could come over. And when he got back to Vietnam, there was a paper saying yes, he could come over. And that's when he met my mom. He asked my mom, do you want to come to America? And she said yes. And they came over around 1999, and I'm here.
So I'm Filipino, and both of my parents used to live in the Philippines, and they both migrated here with their parents.
Definitely. Usually kids don't really know that I'm half Indian, so I'll often hear them saying really horribly anti-Muslim comments. And I've gotten comments in the past, such like, you're a terrorist, once they find out I'm Indian, or Habib, by a certain student whose names rhymes with Tris Trusco. So, and that's not surprising, because his group and people like that often make homophobic and racist comments all the time.
I do feel as though there have been plenty of times in high school where people would make demeaning jokes or say mean things, mostly from the students, not so much the administration, although I have had teachers mix me up with other students who may or may not even be part of my race just because we look alike or because we have similar attributes to each other. But as far as students, just a lot of mean, cruel jokes such as, because I'm Asian, you eat dogs, or open up your eyes, or the only reason that you're good in math is because you're Asian, and demeaning, stereotypical comments such as those.
Sometimes when I'm around like the color yellow, some people think that I like blend in with it because I'm Asian. So
Yes. I remember immediately right when I got to BD freshman year, this guy said to me that something about like Jackie Chan. I remember I was just crying, and I told my teacher, and like he addressed it, and like that made it better. But like I do hear sometimes that I hear a lot like dog jokes saying like, do you eat dog, or like Oriental jokes, and that just doesn't make me happy.
Yeah, I feel that there has been some negativity towards my race, because at one point a teacher, I was just making silly jokes, and he's told my friend that it's okay, he's not even supposed to be in this country either way, and laughed about it. But me and my friend were just serious about it, and we thought it was not really cool to do that, make those kinds of jokes.
Well, tuition's obviously expensive here, and I've gotten letters in the mail saying how much we owe and that we have to pay it off by a certain day, but we always do. We've been here for years. I'm the third out of 5, and there's gonna be more of us. But it's also more, they keep us and they do help us out here, but they tell us it's because they need us, and it's not that nice to hear that the only reason I'm still here is because I add to that diversity. And that's probably like one of my biggest ones, is just telling me that they want me here because I'm Hispanic. I hear a lot of Mexican jokes. I mean, I can take them, but after a while, the same ones over and over again, it gets kind of old. But that's pretty much the main issue I have.
I believe although it is better than it used to be from my freshman year, we still have a lot of work to do, and that becoming an accepting, welcoming community, especially as Catholics, we have a lot of positivity to work on.
When you come into the hallways, you just see white faces.
I feel like that there's not enough diversity at Dwenger, like especially in clubs.
I think Dwenger is getting there to where it's like diverse and everything, but it's not yet there. But I've seen the freshman class this year, there's way more.
It's getting better now, but with Latinos, there's obviously a lot more, and that's kind of nice to see, because more people know what I'm talking about when I talk about music or TV shows and movies, which is great, but definitely not as great as it could be. Well, not all Latinos are Mexican. It's probably one of my biggest ones. The Mexican jokes do get old after a while, especially the same ones, non-original, the names. When you ask me to speak Spanish on command, it's probably my biggest issue. It gets old, and I'm not gonna answer. I do come from a different background, but I'm also fully American. So I mean, treating me like a minority is kind of weird after a while, especially when I grew up here in Indiana. Yeah, I'm from a Texas family, but I was raised here in the Hoosier State. So I don't know. I never really felt different until I went to school, where I was the only Mexican girl till 5th grade, and still kind of feel that way.
You should just respect everyone's origins and everything like that. Like, it's not really a joke to make fun of, especially since there's a lot of people here who work hard, especially because some parents come here wanting the best for their children and for the rest of the generations.
I wish just anybody knows that like the jokes really hurt. Like, I know I really like laugh it off, but it does stick with me, and like I hear it all the time. Like I heard one time for a dress down day, I heard someone say behind my back say ching chong, and like I probably did not even know this person in the first place. So yeah.
I wish that we as a community would learn that despite our differences and despite our flaws, we can overcome them, and we are all just teenagers and high schoolers trying to figure out our way in this life.
I wish there was more education on different cultures and religions, like the ecumenism class. That shouldn't be an elective, that should be required, so kids are knowledgeable on different cultures, because I think the cure to racism is empathy and understanding.
I wish they knew that sometimes the jokes can be offensive, so they should just watch what they say.
That they should be more aware of what's going on with their teachers and students.
I wish they would like actually address the issue, like not like pretend that they didn't hear it. Like I remember in one of my English classes, someone was talking about how they ate a dog, and like that teacher just like looked crazy. But the thing is, like they don't understand is in Vietnam, like you need to do everything you can to survive. Like in a way, in equivalent to America, it's like eating like chicken here all the time. Like it's still an animal, and like to live, like you're willing to do anything to live.
I wish the administration would recognize that we have a problem and not ignore it. They ignore a lot of problems in this school, and I think this is one that should be recognized.
I know that you can't facilitate everything, and controlling what your students say and do is very hard, especially in a high school atmosphere, but being able to step in when there are demeaning comments or maybe jokes that aren't really that funny and are actually hurtful to others, just by saying a word or telling them to cut it out actually does help a lot.
I wish that they should like pay attention to more of what other people say, like the jokes, because it can be offensive sometimes.
The administration is mostly white, which they don't really understand what it is to grow up in a different background, and like values are different, but I mean, they just don't understand struggles and like things that we have, cultural things that we do, traditions, languages that we speak. They just telling us that we're here because we add to your diversity is probably the worst thing I've ever heard. I don't feel valued almost. I don't feel like a person. I just feel like I'm here to let people know that we do have more than white people at this school. That's probably.
Students here face jokes and comments every day from peers, faculty, and staff. This was just a few stories that we were told throughout the course of our investigation, and the problem has transformed into a much more heartbreaking situation, knowing that many students have left Dwenger in the last 10 years due to unrelenting bullying due to racism. And here's an interview with a teacher of color who was also a student here at Bishop Dwenger. Hopefully here we will see an unbiased view from both sides of the line.
I consider myself Hispanic. My dad is an immigrant from Cuba. He came all by himself when he was 13 as a refugee. And then when I was growing up, every Sunday we'd go to my grandparents' house and everybody was speaking Spanish. But that was really my only experience with Spanish, just like kind of Sunday culturally, but I still identify, as Hispanic. And then coming to Dwenger, it was just kind of like a side part to who I was. I don't know that it was really an identifying thing, so I don't know that I stuck out and maybe people saw me as different, but still, I mean, it's part of my family culture, and it was still a part of who I am. And as a present faculty member, I don't know that I've ever experienced any kind of difference for being Hispanic. I know for sure my dad told me as a kid, one time I came home with a bad grade, and maybe from his perspective, he felt like he had to try even harder because people would just automatically assume because of his last name that he was stupid, and maybe that was his experience. Just maybe because you're Hispanic, that people will just automatically think that you're not as smart as everybody else. So a bad grade really was not acceptable, and so he made me for sure work to get those good grades, really just kind of to defend the family name. In regards to the faculty, I don't know that I have seen that so much, but definitely in regards to the student population I have, because I was on a council with the diocese. It was maybe 5 to 10 years ago, but our superintendent at the time recognized that we had a huge Hispanic population in the diocese, and most of those families were Catholic, but they weren't coming to the Catholic schools. And so people like me and Mrs. Becker, and even our current soccer coach, Carlos Cruz, and I know Mrs. Albertson was at Lures at the time, but we were all on this panel to try to find ways of how we could, get these families to feel comfortable coming to Catholic schools and figure out what the issues were. And so we took a lot of steps, and I think now we can see there is a large population of Hispanic kids in the high school. I don't know about in the grade schools, but I think there may be a perceived negative sense, like maybe some of the kids will have an attitude towards the Hispanic kids, and I'm not exactly sure what they're saying, but I think myself, I would always think, well, if they're going to say stupid things, like, I don't care about that opinion, I'm better than that, but still, I think the school has been working at least to bring people in, but to teach people how best to deal with people that are different than them, I think we could do better with that. Even in, with African Americans in our school, when I went to school here, we had African Americans too, but it was kind of like a side thing, like we're expecting them to fit in with us rather than really kind of appreciate where they're coming from and what it's like to be, in their families. So I think we could be doing more as a school, really just to get people comfortable with each other and not just be so ignorant. I think that's a big problem, just ignorance. I think as a Catholic school, they're definitely open to it, but I don't know how much they're pursuing it. So I think, the church is welcoming to everybody, and yeah, I don't know if there's anything structured, like even a special program, like to get our kids involved with, being racially inclusive. I think it's just more like if things happen, then we'll deal with it at the time. But for sure, I think ignorance is a big problem where we maybe should have some kind of structured program, and I don't know if you incorporate that into the theology curriculum or into the social studies program or wherever it is. Just kind of find a way to make everybody more aware of all the different backgrounds that people might come from. On both sides of the issue, I think maybe people that do come from different backgrounds, I kind of wish they knew something that really just comes from age and experience, but be comfortable with who you are and not care so much about what other people think about you. But then I think it would also be good for our students, maybe on the other side, to know that just because somebody's different from you, that doesn't mean that they're bad or they're less than you. It's just different, and they have, a different set of gifts that they might be bringing to the table. So I think ignorance in that case could be something that we really could deal with. And then just the other one is just kind of keep encouraging kids who maybe feel like they're suffering from racism or whatever to just, be more comfortable with, like, who cares if somebody is saying something about you. I know it's tough.
As a Catholic school with an overwhelming majority of Caucasian students, the overwhelming message that we have for the student body is really just check your privilege and check your ignorance. Guad and Corinne, out.